Okay, in summary of non-renewable energy here, I'm just going to kind of go over a few points. Now, before I get going here, what you're going to want to do basically to prepare for the final exam is go back through all the different videos, make sure that you kind of go through the pros and cons, understand how each energy source is extracted from the earth, how it's created, how we use it, how it's burned, the kind of the basics of it, and understand the pros and cons for each of them. But really, in the end, what it comes down to is energy conservation, as you see here. And this is the practice of reducing the energy that we use. And that's kind of what your lifestyle projects are all about. A lot of you did choose to focus on your energy use at home and turning off lights when you leave a room and, things like that. So you see this little pyramid here off to the right. And the base of the pyramid is energy conservation. That's where we all really need to start, is conserving our energy, using as little as possible. And then the next thing is to become efficient in our energy. And once we've done those two things, energy, conserving as much energy as we can and becoming more efficient, then at that point, that's when we want to look to renewable energy sources. So a lot of times students get all excited when we start the next section when we start talking about solar, rooftop solar, especially for homes, and they want to jump into it and get solar on the rooftop right away. And I've had guest speakers come into the face-to-face class, and the first thing that they always say is, before you invest in any kind of renewable energy, whether it be solar, whether it be, you want to put a little wind turbine in your backyard, whatever you want to do, the first things that you should do is look into conserving and making your house really efficient. So getting Energy Star appliances, making, improving insulation, putting in double paned windows, adding energy efficient drapes that reduce the amount of heat you're losing, adding shade around the house, things like this that really help you reduce the amount of energy you're using. Then look to the renewable energy because you're that's kind of one of the best ways to reduce to begin with. And so we can extend the life of our non-renewable energy supplies by doing these things, by being less wasteful, and we also reduce our environmental impact. So those are really important things to consider. Now, something I like to mention here is something called cogeneration. And cogeneration is basically where you're taking heat that is being given off during the production of electricity using, anything, whether it be fossil fuels or whatever, taking some of the heat that's being given off by that and actually putting that heat to use. Remember, when we look at the biomass pyramid, we say that only 10% of the energy passes to the next trophic level. 90% is given off as non-useful energy, heat. Okay, but we can take some of this heat that we're losing, same thing when we're burning fossil fuels. It is not an efficient transfer. You're losing a ton of energy off to heat. Well, wouldn't it be great if we could take that heat and put it to use? Heat buildings, heat water, produce different types of power with it. That's something to definitely look into. And that's the idea of improving your home design, is to reduce the energy required to heat it and cool it. We have we've had these guys come in called the Green Guys, and they actually remodel and refurbish homes here, especially in Palm Springs, but here in the Coachella Valley. And they actually have a home that was built in the 60s in Palm Springs. And all they did was go in and put much better insulation in, put double paned windows in, insulate their attic, do all these things. And they say that they very, very rarely ever have to turn on the air conditioning or the heat because what they're doing is using a lot of the ideas of cogeneration. They're letting their own body heat warm up the area because it's so well insulated, it really keeps that heat in. Anytime they turn on the oven or the fridge, those are all giving off heat, and that house holds that in during the winter. So they very rarely have to use the heater during the winter. Of course, in the summer, when they have air conditioning, then they're able to keep the house cooler because they're not letting a lot of that heat in by having that really efficient insulation. Now, this is where you guys need to get active. You need to vote and get out there and vote with your wallets too. Buy energy efficient products. I know it's a little more expensive, but in the long end, you end up saving energy. And you're doing a good thing, not only for your own family and for your own wallet, but also consider your overall impact to the earth. I mean, that's what you're taking this class for. Individuals can choose to reduce energy consumption. You can choose to drive less. If you live close to work, ride your bike once a week. Even once a week makes a big difference. Or if you work near someone, carpool. Turn off lights when you're not in a room. Turn down your thermostat just a couple of degrees. Buy energy efficient machines. These are all things that will really help with that consumption of fossil fuels. And overall, our society can make more efficient devices. You know, we can demand that our representatives demand Congress to put in fuel efficient cars, more electrics, more hybrids. It's just recently that Congress finally forced the US to increase their mile per gallon up to 35 miles per gallon on cars. Now, interestingly, we couldn't even take our 35 mile per hour, excuse me, 35 mile per gallon cars over to China and sell them because they're getting 50, 60, 70 miles per gallon out of their cars. They wouldn't buy a US car there even if they wanted to. And that's because our standards are so low. You see in this slide, this is what I'm talking about. 2007 was when they finally passed to raise the average fuel efficiency to 35 miles per gallon by 2020. So we haven't even gotten to 2020 yet, which is why you see a lot of cars that aren't at 35. But it's a lot lower than other developed nations. So this is kind of a slap in the face. You know, we're up there with technology. Why are we not making cars that are more fuel efficient? We may have to give up some of the things that we like driving a giant SUV around. You know, you might have to start driving a smaller car, but that may be what it comes to if you don't want to have to ride a horse to work in the next 50 years because we've run out of fossil fuels. So that's something to think about. Conservation and renewable energy is needed. So we, basically talked about that. Effective energy conservation. If we all started conserving, we could save about 6 million barrels of oil a day simply by doing things by turning off the lights in rooms, carpooling, doing, all these things, buying energy efficient appliances for your home. Conserving energy is better than finding a new reserve. Okay. It decreases your environmental impacts while extending what we have. So instead of continuing to plow through what we have, maybe we need to start thinking about how can we conserve and make it stretch out longer. I mean, for example, I have a chocolate bar sitting in my fridge. If I take 3 bites every hour, it's not going to last as long as if I take just a little bite and savor it and I get a little bit more. I'm still getting my chocolate fix, but I'm making it last longer. I know that sounds like a dumb example, but that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. And of course, regardless of how much energy we conserve, we still need energy, and that means that we need to look into renewable resources at some point. But here's something to leave you with and something to think about. I personally don't think, and I want you to think about, should we be asking, can we find more? I don't think that's what we should ask. A lot of people, they're questioning, have we peaked in our oil production? And I don't think that's the question that we should be asking. The question I think we should ask is not what have we peaked in our oil production, but does it make sense to keep relying so heavily on fossil fuels? Does it make sense? Should we focus on extracting a resource that we know is limited and that may create immense environmental damage and continue to create immense environmental damage in some of our last remaining wilderness areas? Or would it be better to focus on developing alternative energy sources? That's something that you guys have to think about. And that's something that, we're trying to get your brains thinking about in this class. With our current technological abilities, shouldn't we be able to develop alternative energies that can meet our energy demands? And the answer is yes, we can. We can do it, but we choose not to. And a lot of that has to do with government. A lot of it is through subsidies. The government puts tons of money into our oil companies. They have huge investments in there. They subsidize the crap out of those guys. They give renewable energy companies jack diddly squat. It really comes down to that when you compare them. So you guys have to get out there and vote and let your voices be heard. Okay, we're going to jump into renewable energy in our next videos and go through those guys. And then our last section is going to be human population, and then we're done with the semester.